Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmer, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of statewide news service and jbiztechvalley.com. We have a very, very special guest with us today, Assemblyman David Weprin. David, welcome to the Jewish View, all the way from Queens to Albany. Well, of course, you're in Albany for the capital, but welcome to the Jewish View.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, so I'm glad we had this opportunity. You have roots to some extent in Albany. You went to SUNY Albany.
I did. I went to SUNY Albany. I graduated in 1977, and actually the Shabbos House was started by Rabbi Israel Rubin during the time I was at SUNY Albany.
And charter member it is.
I was a charter member. And we also had a kosher pizza shop that my roommate was involved with at the time, and a kosher hot dog stand that my roommate was involved with right outside the Capitol.
So that's great. Now, we really can't gloss over the fact that you come from a prestigious family. Your brother was an assemblyman. He's now in the New York City Council. But even eclipsing that was the fact that your father was the assembly speaker and someone who I personally admired quite a bit, because he really had a lot, integrity, and you didn't have to worry about the any wrongdoing going on behind the scenes or anything. I mean, it's such a shame that he left us in such a young age. But
thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, there has been a Weprin in the assembly seat I represent, although the lines have changed a little bit over the years. But since 1971, there's been a Weprin. First my father for 23 years, and then my brother Mark for almost 16 years, and I've been in the seat for a little over 4 years.
Well, and you came from the city council, and your brother went to the city council for your seat. You kind of switched seats because the New York City Council is term limited. And your brother, I went to college with your brother at UAlbany. So we were friends before we were at the Capitol, and he was just looking to get back to New York City for personal reasons. So that was a good move for him and a good move for you, because you're not term limited here.
I guess that's as it turns out, but it's not a body that I'm not familiar with through my father, and having been at SUNY, I also interned up here.
Who'd you intern for?
Well, I started out my first internship was with Assemblyman Joseph Lisa from Queens, who later became a Supreme Court judge. And then I worked for Assemblyman Ed Lehner, who was head of the Housing Committee at the time. And
who was in the assembly back then that's still there now?
A number of people.
Richard Gottfried?
Godfrey is a senior member. He's been there since
he was
since
22.
1971. And Joe Lenthal has been there since 1973.
Yeah.
Denny Farrell has been there since 1975. So they were all here.
Wow. And do you remind them that you were an intern when they were already senior members?
I think they remember that. I think they remember I was around. And I actually also went into Governor Mario Cuomo's administration in 1983, so I spent a lot of time in Albany as Deputy Superintendent of Banking for New York State. So
and when you were on the City Council, weren't you head of the Ways and Means or Budget Committee?
Finance Committee.
Finance
correct.
Committee.
And I used to come up to Albany occasionally for that as well, but more so obviously when I was an intern, and then also when I was a deputy in the banking department.
Now, are you looking to be on the Ways and Means Committee? Because you're not on there yet.
No, I'm on the banking committee.
Right.
And I have been since I've been in the assembly.
Well,
and I'm on the insurance committee, and because now, they merged the agency. It's no longer the banking department or the insurance department, but it's the
Financial
Services Department.
Right.
So it's an area that I've been involved in for a lot of years.
And you're on Judiciary, and you're on Election Law and Codes and Cities Committee.
Correct.
And you're on the Task Force on People with Disabilities.
Right. I just got appointed in January as chair of that task force.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Now, why is that important to you? You obviously choose committees that are close to you and important to you.
Right. Well, the task force on people with disabilities is very important because it's a very broad jurisdiction.
Well, to you personally, I meant.
I've been involved in issues of helping people with disabilities going back to my city council days when I was finance chair, and we did a lot of funding for accessibility for people in wheelchairs, for people with physical as well as mental disabilities. It's an area, of very vulnerable citizenry, a class of people that really need governmental help. And it's one of the most satisfying things about being in government is being able to help people that can't help themselves and really need
Do you
that
have
government assistance.
anyone in your family is a person with disabilities? Or?
Well, I think we're all a
Disabled.
person with disabilities at one point or another in our lives. Sometimes it's temporary, and then, of course, as we all age, we all, have certain disabilities that come with age. So,
It's very interesting you say that because Mark, of course, is our man in the Capitol, and we've had many assemblymen and senators here. And it just seems to me, and again, I consider myself the man in the street. I'm a rabbi. I'm not a politician. But just listening to all of them, people say, well, I want to go into social services and help people. And of course they do, and a lot of social services and things like that. But it seems to me that people in the government, you probably have a stronger role and a more position, saying, well, I want to help people. People think, oh, politicians, you're there for the glory. I don't know what the person in the street thinks. But really, you're the most powerful social services people in the world. I mean, just in New York State. I mean, you pass a bill and to help people, it's more than any social worker can accomplish, spending millions of dollars or helping people for this or that. It's interesting. To me, it's a new perspective, and I'm sure it is to many of our viewers, that they don't understand really what politicians are and what you're doing. Yes, no, or you make a speech, but I mean, it's powerful to change society and help people that way, and a great role of helping people.
we'd like to try our best, and I think you summed it up well. That's one of the areas that we as elected officials can really make a difference.
I wanted to get into some of the legislation that you're proposing, that you have under your name, and there's something called the Religious Garb Act.
Right.
And I'm not sure if people understand that there's discrimination based on the type of clothing people wear for religious purposes, for social purposes, whatever. So could you explain the bill a little bit?
Absolutely. It would apply to not only religious garb, but facial hair as well. So it would obviously apply to the Hasidic Jewish community. We actually had somebody that was supposed to, of the Hasidic community in Brooklyn, join the NYPD in New York City, and they actually told him that his beard had to be trimmed because it was too long for their qualifications, and he actually had to resign after going through training with the police department. So obviously would cover somebody like that.
Well, at least he's a fit Hasidic Jew now. but I wanted to.
I also have a large Indian American population in my district and a large Sikh community in Queens, and it would be a very important bill to the Sikh community because, as you know, Sikhs, as part of their religious beliefs, have to do not cut their hair, either their hair on their head or their facial hair, and they wear turbans that cover the hair on the head. They're kind of like Nazirim in a sense, that they don't cut their hair at all from birth, and they've been discriminated against because there are a lot of uniform agencies where they don't want them to wear the turbans or have the long beards.
Well, they think there's something hiding in there besides hair, and it's a disclosure thing. But
well, one example actually that's really significant is there was somebody named Kevin Harrington who was actually a convert to Sikhism. He was born an Irish Catholic, but converted to Sikhism. He still uses Kevin Harrington. I think it's Kevin Harrington Singh, because you take on Singh as the name, or Kevin Singh Harrington it might be. But Kevin Harrington was a train operator for the MTA, and he actually drove the E-train into the World Trade Center on 9/11, and he actually was a hero during 9/11 because he actually rescued people from the burning buildings by taking the train and driving it backwards during 9/11, and he was acknowledged and recognized for doing that. But what happened was shortly after 9/11, there was a lot of discrimination against the Sikh community because of the beards and turbans, because they looked like Osama bin Laden. And people complained because he was very visible at the front of the train as a train operator, and as a result of people complaining from the public that they didn't want somebody that looked like Osama bin Laden driving a train, and he might have been a terrorist. They actually told him he could no longer operate the train, and he had to go to the rail yards where he wasn't visible. and he brought a lawsuit, and it took years and years, and they finally settled. But had my bill been law at the time, they could not discriminate against him because of his beard and turban.
Now, when it comes to police officers and beard, isn't that a safety issue?
Well, my
For
legislation
the
does
individual?
allow, my legislation does allow the employer, it doesn't have to, it could be a private employer as well as a public employer, to show an exception if they can show that someone cannot effectively do their job with the religious attire. It's a tough burden to prove, and it switches the burden to the employer. Because we all know that in India, you have Sikh, officers,
Right.
police officers, firefighters, members of the military. The prime minister
Yeah, but-
in India is a Sikh.
But it's also like wearing a tie as an officer. They discourage that because it could be used as a weapon and used to strangle you. And if a beard, if the prisoner, you get in a scuffle, you pull the beard, I mean, there's all sorts, you can have injury.
Well, that's kind of far-fetched, I
No,
think.
is it? I mean, I think that's.
You can make that argument about any employment, in the
Well-
military, we've had, you can have, Hasidic officers in Israel in the military in certain aspects. I know it's a whole nother issue.
That's right, it's a
topic for
whole
another
other issue.
subject about, Haredi Jews being drafted. But I think even before that, you had a number of volunteers as well, certainly in the case of, a war. So we've had people with beards in Israel and in the military in all aspects.
And in Rockland County, they got around it in Muncie. I think there is an observant Jew who's on the police force in Muncie or in Rockland County, maybe the county sheriff's office. But they got it. I don't know if you had a discussion with anyone in Rockland County about how they handled it.
Well, look, I mean, how many police officers have that? They have guns. They're still going to carry a gun.
Yeah.
And somebody pulls your beard, you can pull the gun on them. It's not, it's not.
No, but did you have conversations with folks in Rockland County to craft the bill and to see how other?
Not really. I mean, I had a discussion with the NYPD. I had discussions with the MTA.
Okay.
But in some cases, certainly in the case of Kevin Harrington and the MTA, it was just discrimination.
Who's carrying the bill in the Senate?
Senator James Sanders, also from Queens, who also has a large Sikh population in Richmond Hill, which I represent.
Any Republicans?
He's getting co-sponsors now, but
Okay.
we actually passed the bill already in the Assembly with only one negative vote. Passed with bipartisan support, Assembly, Democrats and Republicans.
Did the Republican, first of all, who voted against it, do you remember?
I'd rather not say.
Okay.
It was a Republican member. I don't want to single him out on
I'd
a
like
TV
to.
show.
I want to know if we had him on the show or not. But anyhow, I wanted to also find out, was there a long debate over this? Or was it something that was
There was a little bit of a debate.
a little bit of the debate? Okay. Because the Republicans like to debate everything. I mean, no matter what the point is, they just seem to get up and just want to bring up every
Is there a
point.
bill about adoption? That's what I...
Yes, there is.
Because I have actually a person...
Adoptees Bill of Rights.
Yeah, right.
And I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Absolutely. That bill actually has a lot of support in the Assembly. We have, I think, over 80 sponsors at this point, and you only need 76 to
Right.
pass a bill. So you would say, well, just bring it to the floor, and it's going to pass. But unfortunately, it's not always that simple when you're dealing with the legislative process. But it's very simple, and there have been a number of movies, most recently Philomena, that talks about the need that a lot of adoptees have had to search for their birth parents and for information on their heritage, culture, religious background, but there are real medical reasons why. Basically, the bill would allow adoptees, when they become adults at the age of 18, to seek out and get a copy, a certified copy or a non-certified copy, because the original birth certificate of the adoptee parents became their official birth certificate, so it's called a non-certified birth certificate, but it would identify their birth parents, their place of birth, their religion if it was known, etc., at the time of 18 when it's requested. Right now, the health department still maintains those records in New York State, but they're sealed. They're sealed at adoption, and an adoptee doesn't have access to those. And a lot of adoptees, we had a hearing on January 31st, and we had extensive testimony from, I think, about 38 witnesses in favor. There were only 2 against, and the 2 against were both judges that felt that it would take it out of the court system, because right now you could seek your birth certificate from the court system, but the evidence has been from people that have tried to do that is it's routinely denied, and it's very hard to show a burden why you need your birth certificate.
Well, genetics.
Well, it's medical, and I have just, a personal story as being a rabbi. So one person came to me, and he was a young man who's already 20, and he said that he was adopted by Jewish parents, which I says, well, according to, we're talking about Jewish Orthodox Torah law, and I says, well, we got to know your biological parents just because you're adopted by Jewish parents. And he had a birth certificate, or not certificate, some certificate said the religion of his parents Jewish. I says, just not enough. We have to know who they are. And he even went to the court, exactly what you were just saying, and they said, well, it's sealed and we're not telling you. And we brought out the medical thing. Also, what if it be medical, even though it was more religious, Jewish, and we really couldn't certify him as a Jewish person without knowing his real Jewish parents. And I'm just glad to see that, that this would overcome that burden, because this person was stifled. I mean, I says, we can't do anything about it. I mean, the law is the law, just like it is in civil law. I can't override Jewish law, of course. And there was a real issue.
So where is this bill held up?
Well, no, it actually passed out of the Health Committee already. It's in the Codes Committee, and we have extensive support from the hearing, and I'm hoping to move it sometime after the budget, hopefully before the end of the session. But talking about the medical issue, one of our strong advocates is a woman, and she's very public, so I don't have a problem with talking about her situation. Her name is Jill Auerbach. She happens to be Jewish. But that's not really an issue in this particular issue. She's from Poughkeepsie, New York, and she had given up a child for adoption. She was a teenage mother, unwed, and she gave up the child, and she always wondered what would happen with him. And she later married her boyfriend, was now her husband. Became her husband, and he apparently died of a massive heart attack in his early 40s, and found out later that his father and grandfather had also died of a massive heart attack in their 40s. And her son, biological son that she gave up for adoption 40 years ago, at the time, was approaching the age of 40, and she wanted to warn him to see a cardiologist to get medical history, because he would have no way of knowing as a 40-year-old, healthy young 40-year-old male, that he was in danger of a ticking time bomb of a potential heart attack. And actually, she hired a private investigator, spent thousands and thousands of dollars, located him in another state, got him the medical information. He started seeing a cardiologist on a regular basis, and she may have saved his life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's important when you go. That's why I always thought also, just basically, you go get a checkup. How old's your father? What did he die of? I mean, that's just now routine medical care, and if a person doesn't know biological parents, like you say, here's a perfect case, but many times that's how doctors, you had diabetes, grandfather, father had diabetes. Okay, let's look out for you or put you on a diet. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's that's how they do it. It's not just testing. They look at your background. So, good job over here. That's a good thing.
Let's talk about your hazing legislation you have. You call it Michael Deng's Law?
Well, I hope it becomes Michael Deng's law, and right now it's Michael Deng's bill.
Okay.
Michael Deng was a Baruch College student, a constituent of mine from Bayside, and he was 19 years old, and he was killed in a hazing incident sometime the end of last year. I think it was last December. I don't know if you remember the incident, but it actually didn't even take place in New York State. It happened in Pennsylvania, and he was involved in a hazing incident where it was in the cold and the snow, and he was asked to be blindfolded and carry sandbags, and and then he was beaten, and he literally died. He had a brain affected his brain, and
massive head injury.
Massive head injury, and and he took him to the hospital and he died. So my bill actually would not change the penalty for hazing, because there is still a misdemeanor and a felony on the books now for hazing, but it would do is expand the definition of what is hazing. Right now, you have to have the physical contact with intent to cause harm or recklessly endanger someone and cause harm.
When you were in college, did you join a frat?
I did not.
Because there were frats on the
There were, on
campus.
Colonial Quad.
Yes.
We had a lot of fraternities, but I did not join that.
Oh.
I joined Hillel. There was no hazing.
No
instead,
hazing for
except,
Hillel.
It
How
wasn't
many
like that.
conditions can you eat over here?
Oh,
How many
how much
latkes
cholent
are-
could you eat in Shabbos? We
It's
didn't-
the
we didn't
Jewish
have-
hazing over here.
But my definition of hazing under this law, this legislation, would basically expand it to any physical contact during an initiation ceremony. So there's no reason why you have to have physical contact. You can have a ceremony, you can have, I don't even mind if you have, a test, of information or knowledge and pass a written test, an oral test, but there's no reason why there should be any physical contact in that ceremony.
You have 5 children.
I do.
Do you?
And 3 grandchildren.
Okay, well then some of your children are not in college then. Are some of them in college?
I have one that's still in college.
Okay, and did you talk to him about hazing or her and about
him.
about frats and joining frats and all
Yeah,
that?
he's at Queens College. They're not so big on fraternities, but he's not.
Okay. So you would suggest that people don't join frats, or they
No,
just
I didn't
join?
say that.
No, I know you didn't, but I'm saying, or would you just say, join a frat, but don't get into the physical part of hazing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think fraternities in general should be involved in physical hazing rituals. That's really what it is. I mean, there could be other initiation ceremonies that don't involve physical contact. Because once you're dealing with physical contact and a ceremony, you don't know where it's going to lead and where it's going to
And
go.
at SUNY Albany, there was a death because of hazing on Indian Lake, outside of Indian Quad, where a student voluntarily, wasn't mandatory, but voluntarily went into the water of Indian Lake, and there was some electric current that was running through, and the university was held liable for the student dying by his foot hitting that electrical outlet. And the physics department had done tests in that lake years before and told the school administration that they found current coming through, a light current coming through the water, and the university didn't do anything for years until this death
Wow.
occurred. So that was a multi-million-dollar settlement. But of course, there's no money on life that you could put on a life. So
Correct.
that was something in our own backyard that happened at SUNY.
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk to you about the academic boycott bill, which I think a lot of people have jumped, SUNY and a lot of other places have jumped on the bandwagon to oppose what this group wants to boycott. You explain the whole thing. It's
Yeah, it's kind of an academic professors, on different campuses, and there's a part of a movement to boycott Israel or Israeli goods because of what they consider a mistreatment of of Palestinians, which is obviously, as we know, is not true at all. Israelis treat the Palestinians much better than the Palestinians were treated in the Arab countries, and certainly there's more democracy in Israel, and human rights, not violated under Israeli rule as there is in a lot of the Arab countries. So that's a fact, actually. And Israel is the only democracy in the Mideast. But there is this intellectual movement to have some comparison between Israel and the Palestinians and apartheid in South Africa. So there's a movement to boycott Israel, which in and of itself is outrageous. And what we're saying in this legislation is that they should not get government funding to participate in a boycott of any country, really, but in this particular case, it's Israel.
Is every Jewish assembly person on here?
I'm really not sure. I don't.
Because I look at this and I see that there's a lot of co-sponsors for the bill. The bill is carried by the Speaker of the Assembly.
Correct.
But there's a multi-sponsor. John McDonald's a multi-sponsor. What's the difference? Explain to the audience the difference between a co-sponsor and a multi-sponsor.
Well, they're both sponsors. They consider it a co-prime and a multi-sponsor. It's just a different paragraph.
But why have that? Why have the distinction? Is it does it mean anything? Does it?
But, my attitude is, when I sign on to bills, is that I very rarely are a multi-sponsor. I'm either a co-prime sponsor or not a sponsor at all. Because, it's almost like, being, a little bit in support. It's if I'm going to support something,
Right.
I'm going to support it all the way. So I generally don't sign on as multi-sponsors. Other people feel that if they're multi-sponsors, they're not as actively involved, possibly,
Okay.
in promoting the legislation.
And with this bill, this boycott bill, New York Civil Liberties Union is opposing it aggressively. So, I mean, how do you deal with them when they come to your office and they try to lobby you or advocate?
Well, I say, I respect the American Civil Liberties Union on a lot of their positions, but for example, I remember when they took a very strong stand in favor of Nazis marching in Skokie, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, a Jewish suburb. We had a lot of Holocaust survivors at the time, and I think there's an exception. I'm a lawyer. You learn in law school, there is such a thing as First Amendment and free speech, but that doesn't give anybody a right to shout fire in a crowded theater. And that's case law that we've learned in law school, by the Nazis marching in Skokie with a very large Holocaust survivor population at the time. In my opinion, that was shouting fire in a crowded theater.
Now, this boycott was brought upon by the American Studies Association.
Correct. A group of mostly professors, right?
Professors. So they were Jewish professors, or
Some
just,
might have been,
Some might have been.
but they weren't all Jewish
So what's the
professors.
status now of this boycott?
Well, I think it's a small percentage, and I think there have been people very vocal, against the boycott, singling out, ironically, the only country that's a democracy in the entire region, in the entire Middle East. I mean, if you think about it, why aren't they boycotting all these surrounding countries that have human rights violations on a regular basis, that, treat their own population, improperly?
Right.
I mean, it seems kind of ironic that they're singling out the only democracy in the Middle East.
So let me just ask you, we started off talking about the pizza place, we talked about the hot dog stand outside the Capitol. How do you, as an observant Jew, survive in Albany? I've asked this of other observant Jews who've been on the show, so I'm not just singling you out. But how do you survive in Albany here with food and provisions? Do you bring stuff up from home? And
Occasionally, you also have a whole kosher section at Price Chopper. And there's plenty of other stuff you can manage, certain dairy products and, and other
It's not
things.
that bad in Albany, Mark.
it's not that bad, but I just wanted to, what I'm trying to do is...
We actually have a members lounge where we have
Right.
a lot of kosher products.
fruits and other
Yogurt
things like that,
and,
yeah. But I just wanted, like Angelo Mazzone, who has Mazzone Hospitality, they took over all the eateries in the concourse, and I was talking to him about providing kosher food. And he was right on it because he knows the industry, he knows a lot about it, and he has staff who knows a lot about it. So he was like, oh, I'm making that phone call, I'm going to do it, because I told him we have more observant Jews now than we've ever had before in the legislature.
That's true.
So,
I think it's time to reopen the pizza stand.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, when Shelley Silver was first here as an assembly member, well before he was speaker, he used to eat in the pizza shop every night, he told me, when he was up here.
So, but you're doing fine with eating, you're not...
Yeah, I'm managing.
Okay,
I mean,
you're managing, okay. All
I'm
right.
starving over here. We don't want you to starve. And
Well-
it's not that bad in Albany over
Well,
here. I don't
no.
want people to get the wrong image.
I don't either, but I just wanted to show Angelo that there is a need, that the legislators really do want more choice, and that he should really push this further. So I was trying to get your
More is
take
better,
on that.
you're right.
Okay. So I think you should give him
All right, we always give a blessing, but you've been doing great work. You started with the assembly from your roots, but like I say, there's so many things that, not only for, of course, the Jewish community, the observant Jewish community, but the whole state, all these laws are really helpful for everybody. You're doing great work, and continue with success and even more advancement, and of course, everything with good health.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
and Chag Kasher v'Sameach, Aziz and Pesach to all your viewers.
Thank you.